Okay, so welcome everyone. So today, I have the honor to introduce today's fireside chat, and I'm Cindy, the head of content for ABS team. And today's topic is about Bitcoin halving and mining, trading, and politics. So today, thank you so much for the two of you to join us today. We have the CEO of RenrenBit, Zhao Dong, and Sam Bankman-Fried from the FTX. So welcome you two. Today, we're going to have four phases here. First is going to be the introduction, and then we're going to talk about mining discussion and move on to trading and politics. So thank you both so much, and can Sam take it from here?
Yeah, thanks for having us. Super excited to be here. So yeah, I'm Sam Bankman-Fried. I'm the CEO of FTX, a crypto derivatives exchange. Before this, I was working at Jane Street Capital as a ETF trader, and then Alameda Research doing crypto trading.
Great. And the CEO of RenrenBit, Zhao Dong.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I'm the founder and the CEO of RenrenBit. I have been in the crypto business for over 7 years, since 2013. Yeah. Before crypto, I was the founder of Emoji Weather. It's the most famous weather app in China, which has 200 million daily active users right now. I was the CTO and founder of that. That was my first startup project. So before crypto, I sold my shares of that company, and I almost used all of my money to buy Bitcoin at 2013. Yeah, and during the 7 years, I have many. Yeah, for myself, I have a big uptrend and also a big downtrend, because many Chinese people know that I almost had 15,000 of Bitcoin at 2013, but I lost more the next year because the bearish market. I lost 9,000 of Bitcoin because I did a big speculation at 2014, and during because Mt. Gox, yeah, the shit happened. My big position got liquidated, so I lost 9,000 Bitcoin in one day. That was 2000. Yeah, that was February the 10th, 2014. After that, I built almost the biggest mining farm in China. But I was not lucky that year. I lost more money, so I was in big debt in 2015, and I used the 3 years to recover. I almost so in 2015, I was in a big debt. I owed my friends over $10 million. So then I used the 3 years to make money and pay the debt back. And in 2018, so that's the RenrenBit. RenrenBit was born in 2018. We launched our first product, the first version, at November. Yeah, November of 2018, and we have a little successful. Yeah, we until now we have our asset. The RenrenBit balance sheet right now is about 150 million US dollar. And before last month, not last month, before May 12th, before the big crash, the balance sheet was even more. It was almost 250 US dollar. So I have something to share with friends, with you guys right now. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And I think I'd be super interested in hearing also about what you've done to scale up RenrenBit and what what sort of you found to be the most successful strategy, there for really growing out the business.
Oh, so RenrenBit's business model is very simple and straightforward. We first we build we have a off-chain wallet and on-chain wallet. The on-chain wallet, for the on-chain wallet, the users just manage their own crypto asset. They hold the private keys, and it's totally open source right now. But if the user want to borrow money, they have to use our cloud wallet. Just as what I said, Mt. Gox, when Mt. Gox collapsed, I downloaded there were hackers that hacked their database. So I downloaded the database on the website. I analyzed what had Mt. Gox done. I found that since 2011, Mt. Gox was continually selling Bitcoin, which doesn't exist at all. They sell Bitcoin, which doesn't exist. So when the bull comes in 2013, they don't have enough coin to pay people. Of course, there were hacks. There were hacks, of course, but the hacks was not the reason why they got bankrupt. They just don't have enough coin to pay the users. That's the major reason. So because of this, we do know that if a platform is not well regulated, it must do something evil. Without transparency, it must do evil. It's not about personality. It's just about, if no regulation, if no transparency, a platform must do evil. So for RenrenBit, we know this. The only thing to prevent ourselves to do evil, or the only thing that our goal is to do a long-term business. So we give us the restriction. The restriction or limitation for us is transparency. We make everything transparent to our users. So every Bitcoin in our off-chain wallet is shown, is 100% transparent, and we offer our users the tool. It's mathematically, our users can prove that we are 100% reserved by all the Bitcoin or other cryptos. They can check on blockchain, and they can also download our full database, the database of the liability, because the liability means how much coins do the users have on your platform. So our users can download the full database of the user asset or the liability. They can verify if our asset is bigger than the liability. By this, I think this is the best way to prevent a platform doing evil. Yeah. So that's the basic service of RenrenBit platform. Above this, we offer the crypto holders, we offer them the liquidity. They can borrow money with the crypto as collateral. We have two major features for the lending. First is peer-to-peer, or you can say call it customer to customer. So if a user want to borrow money, he can put his crypto as collateral or pledge. He pledge his Bitcoin on the RenrenBit's option wallet. And since we give the full transparency to the users, the lender, the money lender, can see his order um, publicly. He can see the duration and the interest rate. If he thinks the duration and interest rate is good, he can directly lend the money to the borrower. That's our peer-to-peer lending or C2C lending business. Another is we call flash loan. The P2P lending is mostly for middle and small users. Mostly their lending size is below 1 million US dollar. But for big users, it's not easy to match the loans for most of the time. So we have some big money supplier. They lend money to us, and we lend the money out to the users on our platform. In this case, our users can borrow up to $100 million, or of course the money is mostly in Tether, because Tether is the biggest demand right now for the money flow between different platforms. Yeah, so that's our business.
Thank you, Zhao. Thank you, Zhao. So we're circling back to Sam right here. Sam, we'd like to get a better understanding kind of what you're seeing with Bitcoin halving, and what are you feeling about this current market? Apparently, there's a huge dip, a huge market crash recently, which took a lot of us by surprise. But we would like to kind of get your idea about kind of your overview with Bitcoin halving and what your opinion about it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so you know, there's clearly a ton of excitement going into it, and you could see it from sort of all of the metrics. I mean, you could see it from what social media looked like in basically every language. You could see it from new user signups. You could see it from interest rates. You could see it from volumes, and you could see it from prices. I mean, Bitcoin basically doubled in the last month, and you even saw it with hedge funds, at least one notable one buying a bunch of CME futures, and I think that sort of is what I think a lot of people would expect going into that, into the halving, but I also think that that you often see reversion, at least to some extent, when these things happen. And you can look at what happened when CME and SIBO futures listed a few years ago. You had this massive price increase running up to them, went from like 3,000 to 20,000 in a few months. And then, sort of the crash started a little bit after that. And I think a lot of this was, maybe the world put that bet on too big. Maybe there were a lot of people preparing to sell out right after. And so you sort of saw a reversion of some of that buying that came after. And I wouldn't be shocked if we saw sort of similar things here. And that doesn't necessarily speak to what's going to happen long term, but just that, Bitcoin sort of ran up to 10K, and maybe the market thinks that's a little too much, and a lot of those people are sort of selling out now. And so that's sort of my best guess about what we're seeing going on right now, and certainly saw a lot of liquidations in the 8K range. Which also, sell side liquidations, which also makes it seem like there are a lot of people getting pretty levered long, around 9,000 or so, and probably trying to make a short-term halving play, and then sort of getting liquidated when reversion came maybe sooner than they were thinking.
So we want to ask you about what are the implications here to the miners with this volatility going on, and just price going up and down, left and sideways, and just a little crazy. We just want to ask both of you. We'll start with Sam. Just kind of, what do you think minus what are they going through in their mind right now, and then what do you think is happening to the whole mining community in the couple of weeks or couple of months going forward?
Yeah, I mean, other people probably are more informed than I, but my understanding is that miners spent a lot of time getting prepared for this, and that right now there's a little bit of a wait and see approach. That a lot of them are sort of they have their financials in order, and they're now sort of gonna see what happens to Bitcoin through the halving before deciding sort of what their next play is. And both seeing what happens to Bitcoin price, but also what happens to difficulty, what happens to total hash rate, and where sort of what the effective price to mine in Bitcoin ends up being. And so, I think they, like the rest of us, are to some extent waiting to see what happens. Once the halving actually happens, to see who's around and who's mining and how much.
Do you think miners will be pulling the plug in the near future?
I mean, some will. My guess is there's obviously a pretty broad spectrum of them. And, the naive guess would be that you would see some miners who had pretty marginal returns pulling the plug, ones who had relatively expensive electricity and were just making margin on it. It wouldn't be shocking to see them stop mining now, whereas, the miners who always had, pretty big margins on their business, keep going. But, obviously we'll see what happens. But, if I had to make a guess, I would guess something like that.
Okay, so Zhao Dong, would like to get your opinion on this. I think the block reward reduction is really placing quite a lot of heavy burdens on miners now, because now that Bitcoin is all of a sudden a lot more expensive. So what do you think about miners, especially given that you've personally helped a lot of miners over in mainland China in the past, and you've been really active in the OTC space, facilitating liquidity? What's going through the miners in miners' mind and perspective, and what do you think are going to happen to the majority of miners going forward?
Actually, some big miners contribute most of our business. As a platform, the 2080 rows means some biggest clients contribute more than 80 of your core business. So the same as on our platform. I believe that I agree with Sam that after halving, there might be a hard time for miners. I'm not expecting a pump in short term. Actually, because the halving is the message that most of the people already know. So the people who want to buy Bitcoin and they may want to take profit after halving, which means selling. And so my expectation might be a big dump after halving. So it will be harder for the most of the miners, but it's just for short term. My theory is actually the Bitcoin price is not driven by halving, or it's actually driven by the real economic. We know that the Bitcoin is a free money. People use Bitcoin to move money around, to across the borders or cross borders. It's free, so you can, for example, in China, you can buy Bitcoin with RenrenBit, and you can sell it anywhere on the world. So with Bitcoin, you can, it's instruments for you to move your assets freely around the world. Actually, I want to emphasize we shouldn't expect much on the halving. That the price is not driven by halving, but something much bigger. What I saw recently is after the pandemic, it changes the world much. Somebody said it will be much. It might be even worse than 100 years ago. The big war. So, but after the pandemic, I believe that China, the Chinese market might become the best investment market for the world. Let me explain it in a bit detail, because China controls the pandemic the best, and for the economic to recover, China also recovers the best. So simply I believe that China will be the best investment market for the future. So which means we know recently also the Fed expanded their balance sheet quite a lot. It's in 2 months they printed 2 trillion, actually 2.5 trillion, and I heard that they will print another trillions in the future, which means the dollar will devaluate. Of course, there will almost all the central banks are printing money, but if you want to know which is the best investment opportunity, that will be China. So that means a lot of money will flow into China. So cryptos, especially Bitcoin and stable coins, will be used as a good instrument for the money moving. Yeah,
Okay,
which will actually drive the price in the future.
Yeah, very interesting point on the pandemic and the 2 trillions have been recently printed. If we'd like to go back to that in a little bit. We got a guest question here from Shimi. If Bitcoin price doesn't change post-halving, many funding firms will no longer be cash flow positive and can be expected to either temporarily or permanently cease operations, especially given the pandemic consequences here. Do you think that we could expect a big crash in BTC price as unprofitable mining ops are being liquidated? I believe Zhao Dong has a quick answer. His belief is that price will crash pretty severely. What do you think about that, Sam?
I think it's definitely a possibility. I mean, we'll see what happens. And often these things are a little bit unpredictable because it's sometimes driven by a few people with giant positions you don't know about. And so, for all we know, there's some guy who's planning to buy $1 billion right after halving, or planning to sell $1 billion right after halving, and that could totally drive short-term price movement. But if I had to guess what's my prior here, I think it's totally plausible that that we'll see a dump after as either miners shutting down or just people who bought before and are selling after, then sort of combined with sell side liquidations. I don't know that's going to happen. So I felt pretty strongly that was going to happen, but we already saw a 12% crash late last week, and so I think right now, I think a big question is like, was that sort of the post mining dump or post halving dump actually happening early, or is that just the prelude with a lot more coming? And I don't, you could see it going either way. I don't know exactly what to expect, but I certainly wouldn't be shocked by it.
I think this brings a good segue into trading, but again, let's. I do have a curious question to Zhao Dong though, which is, do you happen to know a lot of miners who also are traders, and do they take really big positions, like shorting the market or longing the market? Do you know anything along those lines, Zhao Dong, miners as traders?
Not recently, as I know. Actually, I think this wave, after the crash, this wave, I think it's not driven by the existing players. It should be driven by some external players. So the leverage this time is actually much less than before May 12th. Before May 12th, we know on our platform there were our clients borrowed a lot of money, and some of our big clients were liquidated. We have several clients which on average they lost $10 million, but they were just liquidated. So this time, I believe at this moment there were no much leverage on the market, but there will be some guys to take profit after the halving. So I'm still expecting a dump, but not as big as what happened in March.
Okay. I think this brings in pretty good segue into kind of what's happening with the trading activity, the volumes of volatility is happening around this time. Sam, would you kind of offer some of your comments on what has happened leading up to this happening, and what do you think, or maybe you can offer some price predictions here, or maybe not, definitely not a financial advice that we're asking for here, but we'd like to kind of get your opinion on what's been happening, because a lot of things has happened. You know, there's a lot of price movements going up and down, left and right. But you know,
Yep.
what have you been seeing? What have you noticed between this happening and compared to the other previous ones? You know, what do you think the major differences are, and what came about to you as a surprise here, or what do you think it's a learning lesson of you as a trader?
Yeah, so I think like, the biggest difference is the existence of, a ton of trading. I mean, trading volumes have obviously skyrocketed in the last 4 years. And I think part of what that means is that, you have a lot of people placing bets on this halving. You have a lot of people putting leverage positions on going into it. You can see, BitMEX open interest went up for a while. And just like very large volumes on derivatives exchanges in general, showing a lot of people taking positions going into this, generally long positions. And that had a lot of impact on price, and meant that price sort of was driven up by that speculation, in anticipation of the halving. And you also see that when this is all done on leverage, as Zhao Dong mentioned, things go down and people can get liquidated. And he mentioned some people getting liquidated for large size on his platform, and I think that was sort of true across the board. And obviously March 12th you saw gigantic liquidations on BitMEX. That was sort of a different thing, but then late last week we saw some significant ones on a lot of platforms, the base being BitMEX, obviously. And so I think the biggest difference here is going to be people putting big positions on going into it, and whether they take them off or not, and whether they get liquidated or not. And for predictions, I mean, anything could happen. I don't feel confident. I guess, like, I would say certainly heightened chance, way higher chance of a crash right now than at normal times. But I definitely don't feel confident that one's going to happen. And given that it's already crashed $1,000 since last week, maybe that was a crash, and could things recover back up to 9,200? Yeah, certainly they could. So I sort of don't feel super strongly anymore about what to be expecting in terms of pricing, although certainly if Zhao Dong's right that there are a lot of people playing to sell after, that would certainly not be good for short-term prices.
So, Zhao, do you have any comments on what Sam has shared? And we'd like to especially hear kind of your perspective, as one of the larger OTC trader facilitator. What's your take on Sam's opinion?
Recently we didn't see much OTC volume in our side. Maybe so the money must flow in from some other place. As I know, there were some big US OTC desks. They have some big demands because the Fed printed so much money. But from outside in China, there were no much demand for buying Bitcoin. And I'm not a good speculator, because I lost much money in the future. In the past, I lost much money. So I will not do speculation on the price. Although I have my own prediction, I will not speculate according to my prediction. I will only hold Bitcoin for long term, because I believe in the long term. I believe that the Bitcoin price will go to 50 to 100,000 in 2 or 3 years, and go even much higher in the future, maybe 1 million one day. So I will give up short-term speculation. However, my assumption on the price is there might be a calm time after halving, and in about 1 to 2 weeks, there should be a crash, but the crash should be less than last time. So my expectation is just maybe 20 to 40% of the price dump.
So just I want to ask you, like you just said that there weren't much OTC happening during this happening. Why is that? Is it are people just not selling BTC or
Because our demand is from China. We are mainly serving the Chinese users, so we don't see much buying demand in China. So that should be. If you look at the price, if you look at different exchanges, I believe that it's the dollar market, US dollar market buying, not the renminbi market. Actually, we show some selling in the renminbi market. So it's also possible that someone is buying Bitcoin with dollar and selling for renminbi because they need the money flow to China.
okay? I think it brings us a really good segue here into stablecoins, and I'd like to kind of Zhao Dong is obviously specialist in RMB, and of course Sam is a specialist in USD. Let's circle back to Sam. What's the relationship between USD and BTC, and as you see going forward, and what other stable coins kind of playing a role here on kind of giving more character of on price of USD?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things here is Tether. That's sort of a huge driver of flow in crypto, and it sort of serves this dual role. One role that it serves is as USD but on exchanges. And so, someone who has some Bitcoins, they want to get out of their Bitcoins for now, but they don't want to deal with wire transfers. They'll just sell it into Tether to buy back later or something like that. And it sort of serves as a default fiat-like pairing on the biggest exchanges. But it also has this role of the thing people are actually trying to get with their fiat. And so you see a lot of people, especially people coming from countries where there are currency restrictions, who are buying a lot of Tether with fiat. Probably, maybe to buy Bitcoin, but also maybe just to have the Tether. We've seen huge growth in it. We've seen billions of dollars going this year, and we've seen 100 million printed almost every day recently. And there's just been huge OTC inflows into it. I mean, you look at FTX OTC desk, and just every day there are people buying Tether. I think it's maybe slowed down a little bit in the last week, but especially a few weeks ago, I think there's a day where people bought like 100 million Tether OTC on it, and I'm sure that was just a piece of the flow. So I think that that's sort of a big piece of the story. I think people in the West are often a little bit confused by this. I think, Americans are often like, "What? Why not USDC? I don't get it. Like, why do you trust Tether?" And I think they're sort of missing some of the point, which is that they're not the target audience for this flow. I think anyone who sort of says that, is coming from a context of the U.S. banking system, and I think that the target audience here are people who are not in the U.S. banking system. You could imagine an alternate world where it's a different stable coin. I think Tether has a huge first mover advantage there. It's what people are used to, it's been around so long. But if you're asking sort of what's a stable coin in crypto, Tether is sort of the one that people are really buying up, and especially coming out of Asia. Sort of one interesting thing is that recently we've just been seeing inflows into Tether, whether Bitcoin's been up or down, and whether the market's been bullish or bearish. Sort of either way, there's been net buying in Tether, and you can see that in the enormous amount minted, so far in 2020.
Zhao Dong, I mean, you have a long history with Tether. You have long history.
Yeah.
I think speaking of Tether, RenrenBit kind of came about with a good partnership from my understanding, at the very least. Look, we'd like to kind of like you to share about the Tether's role in Tether, your history with Tether, relationship, and and also kind of the birth of RenrenBit as it emerged, and how is playing a role in the market, and what do you think about crypto's reflection on our RMB prices as our RenrenBit is slowly becoming like one of the more major stable coins being traded in and out?
Yeah, I can talk a little about the history of Tether. Actually, before 2014, in 2013, I was one of the big player on Bitfinex. At that time, I just proposed an idea to Bitfinex. At that time, because most of the Chinese crypto players, they don't have dollar account. Yeah, it's very hard. It's actually, even today, it's not easy for most of the Chinese to have a dollar account. So I proposed them, why not we create a altcoin that each coin represent $1. I can sell the altcoin to Chinese people, and they can deposit the altcoin to Bitfinex, and I can do the money making for Bitfinex. But I was not lucky because I went bankrupt at 2014. So Bitfinex did it for themselves. They actually bought the project of Tether, because Tether was built on Omni. The first version of Tether was built on Omni layer. They bought the team, because 2014 was bearish market. They bought the team, and they issued Tether on Omni. But for the first 2 years, there were no much players on Tether. Because I was aware it. I had the idea, so I was always keeping eye on Tether. What made Tether greater? That's actually in 2017, after China banned the exchanges. Before China banned the exchange, it was still easy to buy Bitcoin with the renminbi in China. Yeah, but in 2017, when the market got crazy, the Chinese regulator banned all the exchanges. So the Chinese major exchanges, they have to find a new instrument for the money flow. They have to use Tether. The first exchange started using Tether was Gatecoin. Yeah, Gate. Yeah, they use Tether first, then Binance, then Huobi. So, and then other exchanges follows, which support Tether more and more. And later, there were even more real trade. I mean, the real import export started using Tether. Last year, just half a year ago, when my friend went to Moscow, he found there were a lot of demands there. That there were Chinese people there, there were Russian guys there. They just import goods from China with Tether, because when they send Tether to the Chinese supplier, the Chinese supplier can easily cash out Tether to renminbi in China, which add more value to the Tether ecosystem. For myself, I'm only a small shareholder of Bitfinex, not by intent, because I had asset on Bitfinex when they got hacked, and I converted the asset on the platform to the shares. Then I became a shareholder. And Tether is not a subsidiary of Bitfinex. They are kind of a sister company. So I don't benefit from Tether, but I not directly. But we trade a lot of USDT. We are one of the market maker, you can say. So we make profit by trading Tether. And another thing I want to say is there are something interesting. Just before the Chinese New Year, in the gray market, that's the gray market, or the underground bank in Hong Kong, you know, if people want to change renminbi to dollar, you need to use the Hong Kong Underground Bank. So just before the Chinese New Year, if you want to buy dollar with the renminbi, dollar was still in premium, which means there are more money flow out than flow in. But what's interesting right now is renminbi right now is in premium, which means money is flow in. There are more money flowing into China. So that's the interesting thing we need to care about. That's the something, I believe something much bigger is happening. We must take care of it. Yeah, that also means big opportunity to crypto.
Something big is happening. Could you give a clue here? What is that big's happening? What is happening?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry for my English. I cannot express myself well. As I said, I believe that something is happening proves some of my belief that because China controls the best in the pandemic, and the Chinese economic is recovering the best also. So some big money, maybe they found the opportunity for investing in China. So their money is flowing to China, and part of the money might use crypto for the money movement.
Okay, interesting. Okay, Sam. Just want to still go back to the topic of Tether. Why is Tether important to Bitcoin, and how is it important?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you look at Tether's importance to Bitcoin, the biggest thing, and I think Zhao Dong touched on this a little bit, is you try to trade crypto, and by default, what you trade against, you trade against something like a dollar or something, but when you're trading against a dollar, what does that mean? What exactly is a dollar in the context of a crypto exchange? And historically, the answer has been it's a wire transfer. But wire transfers are hard for a lot of people. I mean, despite being sort of the backbone of the financial economy in some sense, surprisingly few fraction of the world can really send a USD wire transfer. And so you look at something like the best fiat on ramps. You look at places like Coinbase, places like Kraken, Bitstamp, and they've got great routes for people with great USD banking. But for the rest of the world, it's quite tough. And on the flip side, you look at major exchanges trying to get banking, and it's a nightmare. I mean, you go to a bank, you're like, hey, we've got a business, we've got customers, can we have an account? They're like, what's your business? You're like, we sell Bitcoins. And all of a sudden, you can just hear their compliance department groaning in the background. Like, oh, geez, another one of those. Like, this is going to be a huge nightmare. And so, given that actually wires are hard for both sides. So it's hard for the exchange to have a bank account. It's hard for a lot of people to have a USD bank account. And RMB bank accounts are hard to use for crypto for regulatory reasons. And what you're left with is like, well, okay, how do we do this? Like, what's that mean? And what a lot of exchanges do is they just say, fuck it, we'll use Tether. And someone somewhere can figure out how to do this Tether thing, Tether into dollars. And I know Zhao Dong's desk does a lot of that. FTX's desk does a lot of that. Other desks do as well. And then everyone else can sort of minimize the amount that they need to touch fiat when they're dealing with Bitcoin. They only need to, go OTC and redeem or create Tether or buy it or sell it, when they're actually getting their money in or out of the crypto ecosystem. And the whole rest of the time, they can move it around just on the blockchain as Tether between exchanges and OTC desks and everything else. And it just makes the ecosystem so much more, possible to navigate for most people. And so it sort of has formed a decent part of the backbone of the crypto ecosystem for a while as a tokenized fiat-like thing that people can move around and interact with without having to be constantly sending wire transfers.
Okay, so which brings me to a really question that I've always been wanting to know, which is if Tether were to disappear, if the price of Tether were to collapse, if Tether is no longer redeemable for fiat, what's going to happen to the price of Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I think it's worth asking exactly what's happening there, because you can imagine, for instance, redemption restrictions on Tether, like throttling them, in a way that wouldn't have a huge impact on price. And you can also separately imagine something where it just crashes to zero. And I guess, my question for you is, which of those are you talking about? Because I think they have pretty different impacts.
Either two. I think let's explore the two.
Yeah. So one thing you can do for the sort of, throttling, I mean, you can look at what happened, what was it, like a year and a half ago, when Tether went down to 95 cents. And that was related to difficulties in redeeming Tether. And, a lot of this is just, it's hard to get banking to work well. It's hard to send wires. And it's especially true in crypto. And what happened, it didn't really impact Bitcoin price that much. There are dislocations because of this. It had sort of interesting impacts on trading. But, in some sense, the high level answer there was, business as usual mostly. And, on the flip side, you could try and say, well, okay, what happens if Tether actually goes to zero? And, some people might object and say, look, even if it's not redeemable, maybe it's just worth something now. Let's just sort of put that aside and say, what would happen somehow if the price literally did go to zero? It would be a massive shit show. I mean, you look at like, Binance, Wobi, OKEX, all three of them, a lot of the funds stored there are stored in Tether. Those all go under, that's a lot of unhappy customers. It's not exactly obvious what happens to Bitcoin's price immediately. What happens immediately is no one trades against Tether anymore. All the Tether pairs are delisted, and every exchange switches to a new stablecoin. They all switch to whatever, USDC, BUSDH, USDT, USD. Maybe there's a little fracturing. Different exchanges choose different new stablecoins. The biggest thing is there's just an $8 billion hole in the crypto ecosystem that makes a lot of people unhappy, and that people need to deal with. And I think you might very, very short term see a weird pump, not for super efficient reasons, but just because, well, if USDT goes to zero, then BTC USDT goes to infinity. And so, you would technically see that graph diverging upwards, and maybe a lot of things would pump because of that. But, medium term, I would certainly expect that to be bad for Bitcoin and probably bad for its price.
Zhao Dong, what's your take? The nightmare scenario, if the price of Tether were to collapse, what do you think will happen to the market?
Yeah, I think Sam gave a pretty good analyze for if the price crashed, if Tether crashed. I want to talk about the risks of Tether because I might know a little more than other guys. I normally I have a lot of contact with the team, Tether team and the Phoenix team. Yeah. So as my acknowledgement, in the past, for most of the time, Tether hold more than it issued. It hold more dollar than it issued. So before the first time I showed their bank account was in February 2018 when Giancarlo went to Tokyo. He showed me how much money they have in their Noble Bank, and at that time, Tether had 1.8 billion, and Bitfinex has 1.2 billion in Noble Bank account. And just after 2 weeks, I just confirmed with Jeffrey, which was one of the manager team in Noble Bank. I confirmed this number. So I believe they did had a lot of money then, but they got problem later. We know, because we know that they got Bitfinex got 850 million frozen because of crypto capital. Although it's not Bitfinex fault, but of course they cannot process the withdrawal requirement for their clients. That's true. So Tether has, as sister company, Tether has to lend money and use Bitfinex share as collateral, as we know, because they publish this information to the public. And the Tether has lent around 600 million to Bitfinex to help Bitfinex processing the withdrawal. And later this year they said that the Bitfinex had paid back around 100 million, right? So if all of these numbers are correct, compared to if you look at the Tether's balance sheet, right now they have issued 8.5 billion Tether, and if you minus the amount that the Tether borrowed to Phoenix, their reserve rate is still above 90%. Which so talking about the risks, I think the risk for solvency is low. At this moment, the risk on solvency is low, but I believe the risk might come from the U.S. government. Yeah, it's more political. We know that the U.S. regulators might want to regulate everything. Yeah, they want to regulate every economics on all the economics on the world. What we saw last year actually, I attended the shareholder meeting of Bitfinex. Bitfinex has paid a lot of money to the lawyers to fight against the Attorney General, New York Attorney General, to fight with them. They have paid more, tens of millions. Yeah. So, I mean, the risk is from the government side, not from their reserves. They do have enough reserves right now, it's my knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, and I sort of want to mostly agree with Zhao Dong on this. I think, when people talk about tether risk, I think that practically speaking, the real risks that you're talking about is way less likely to be it goes to zero, and way more likely to be like it goes to 97 cents, because it's way more likely to be something like, yeah, they're still fighting over that money frozen in the Polish bank account, and they're switching banks or something like that. Redemptions are harder for a period, and that causes a slight decrease in price. I think you're way more likely to see sort of a moderate scenario like that than really a full-on crash. And you can see that in the upside direction too. But that there's sort of and I think this has died down a lot, but for a while there's a lot of chatter of like, oh no, Tether is about to go to zero. It's a total, and I think that was mostly silly. I think that, Tether was not going to go to zero. The question was where between 90 cents and $1.10 it was going to be trading. And, it wasn't is redeeming possible? It's like, how hard is it? How annoying is it? How expensive is it to redeem? And how much does that impact flow and the premium or discount?
Okay, so and given the lighter situation of COVID-19 here, recently, a month or two back, U.S. government announced, Uncle Sam announced, 6 trillion being introduced into the market as a way to relieve kind of the economy. Did you see any reflection on that news kind of reflecting on the liquidity or volatility of Tether, Sam?
So it's a little bit hard to tell what causes what here, and in particular, like certainly we saw huge Tether inflows during that period, and so you could imagine that people were scared by inflation in the dollar or something like that. But it doesn't really make sense because Tether is worth $1. So, if that's what you're worried about, then you're probably not buying Tether. You're probably buying Bitcoin. I think, in general, when shit gets weird, I you know, you might see more interest in crypto. And I think that coronavirus did that. And I think that more interest in Bitcoin was also spurred by, printing money. But, I think in the end, the biggest factors here are sort of a combination of generally more interest in crypto and, capital movement, which I know Zhao Dong's also sort of touched on a little bit. And I'm sure he has sort of a different window into than I, but uh, uh, we've seen a ton of demand from people to move money around and to have more mobile money, and I think that that's always good for Tether.
Zhao, what's your take? Because you did earlier up front. You mentioned 2 trillion, and then and then Tether even printed more Tether in the past too. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, my opinion is Tether didn't print more than the demand. Yeah, actually, Tether has pretty good business model for themselves. They don't need to do anything bad. They don't need to do speculation. They can, without all the evil things, they can easily make money. Although not much, but it's already not bad. They already made more than 100 million until now. If you look at their balance sheet, it's transparent. It's transparent. They also do some lending. We are one of their clients, but the lending is only a very small portion. It should be less than 200 million. It's less than 200 million right now. So they don't issue more than the asset they hold.
Okay, all right. So this brings into the kind of the final phase or fireside discussion here, which is money. I think we talked about the importance of USD and RMB.
Yeah.
I mean these fiat currencies resemble to some extent sovereignty. They resemble legal tender, resemble the control of government over people, right?
So from my own point of view, Tether is even more trustworthy than some banks, than most of the banks. Most of the banks, they don't hold much reserves.
And what have you noticed? Like, what are the types of people? How would you describe the people holding the characteristics of people holding Tether? I mean, large sums. Who are these people? I mean, what have you noticed? On these maybe certain personality traits, maybe certain, based on your experience with all the secondary market trading, what do you even notice of these large Tether holders? What some characteristics, similarities here?
Actually, we don't hold Tether. We trade Tether. We don't hold Tether. We trade Tether for profit. But our clients, for example, if for a Bitcoin long-term holder, he might sell Bitcoin for short-term. Yeah, if he think the price will go down, he might sell for short-term and keep Tether for several months. And when price is low, he might buy back with the Tether. That's a typical requirement of the Tether. But the more requirements are from the real usage. I mean, real trade, money movements, and also the quant trade team. Yeah, Sam must know more than me. Yeah, there are a lot of quantum trading. They hold Tether, or they can
Yeah.
also borrow. They can also borrow Tether from the market. For example, our platform, you can borrow Tether on our platform, and others can lend you. For example, if I'm short for short term, I can sell my Bitcoin to Tether. And if you want to borrow Tether, I can lend my Tether to you for interest. So that's also a typical usage for Tether.
Sam, do you see
Yeah.
a similar sentiment here?
Yeah, I mean, certainly traders use it a ton because it's what most of the spot volume's against. There's more spot volume against Tether than against USD, so you sort of have to. And also, as Zhao Dong said, most of the borrow and lending is against Tether. Both OTC platforms and exchange borrow and lending. There's more liquidity in the world against Tether than against USD. And so that's certainly a big piece of it. The other thing I would just say is there's huge regional differences here. You see very little demand from America to hold Tether and a ton of demand coming out of Asia. And it's sort of for obvious reasons. Like, the sort of US banking, if your goal is to be exposed to the US dollar, and your options are dollars in a bank account or Tether, what that's going to trace down to is like which fits you better, like USD wire transfers and bank accounts, or crypto, and the answer is very different if you're in America versus if you're not. The USD banking system, not surprisingly, works a lot better in America than outside of America, and it sort of becomes any banking system becomes a nightmare when you have to negotiate between two different countries, which is what happens if you're trying to have a USD bank account, but also you're not in America, and so you also have to deal with your government, and you have to find some solution that works for both. That's a huge pain. And because of this, it's just internationally makes a ton more sense for people to hold Tether than it does domestically. And so whereas you go to America and people are really nervous about Tether and they're like, just give me a wire transfer. I don't trust this Tether thing. You go to Asia and people are like, I don't know about this wire transfer thing. Like,
yeah,
I can try and convince my bank. I don't know about
because
that.
Chinese,
Just give me Tether.
Yeah, Chinese don't have a better option. If they can open dollar account easily, they might not use Tether, but they don't have better option.
Yeah, it's absolutely right.
There is an inherent risk holding Tether here. I mean, I'm just the image that pops in my mind is like someone juggling balls of fire while trying to have fun with it trading. Just like that's the image I have in my mind. But it's like, I mean, the risk is present, but still, it's like Tether seems to be the only instrument to be easily going in and out of the market. It's just, that's something quite interesting when I think about it. But it's just like, do you think that it comes to your mind, Zhao, and as traders and investors, and just mind that maybe the price is just, there's a risk here, but at the same time, this is the easiest instrument to trade with. Does it? Or what goes into your mind, or you just let the day-to-day trading kind of bury these thoughts and just go with it, How do you even hedge? Do you even do hedging against this? Do you hold like fiat currency to hedge this kind of risk, or what do you? What's the system like? Or what's going? Like, what do you guys do in the preparation of this? It just puzzles my mind. I really want to know. I'm gonna
Yeah.
hear.
Actually, this February, I went to Bahamas. I had met with Giancarlo. He told me that the speed of movement of Tether is much faster than any other currency. He told me the turnover of Tether on blockchain, just on blockchain, is 28 times of the total issuance of Tether. If you look at the traditional currency, dollar or RMB, you can say the traditional money, the movement is pretty slow because you need much more time than Tether if you want to transfer money. So even you are a guy that doesn't trust Tether at all, you can still use Tether temporarily. You can accept Tether and cash out it instantly. So there are a lot of this kind of usage. no matter you trust it or not, it can use because of its liquidity. You can still use it well. So I saw many U.S. institutions, although they don't trust Tether, but they have to use Tether. No matter although they don't like Tether, they don't trust Tether.
Sam, your take.
Yeah, I basically agree with that. That you see, given how quickly people get in and out of it, yeah, you don't necessarily need to trust it to use it short term. And I think that's true for a lot of, especially the American oriented trading firms that
Yeah.
will trade it but don't want to hold it. And I also think that for a lot of people who are holding it, you ask them, is there risk? And I think what they'd say is, yeah, there's probably some risk. I'm used to there being risk in fiat. That's sort of how the world is, and this is another one, but it's less than the other options I have, so I'm okay with it. Another thing that I would say is, FTX built a product for people who were needed to hold Tether but worried about this, which is Tether futures. So we have Tether against USD quarterly and perpetual futures, in case people need to trade or hold Tether, but are worried about it and want to hedge their exposure. So you could hold Tether but short the Tether futures. And we've seen some interest, but not huge amounts. And I think partially that just speaks to we haven't had the right traders for it, but I think partially that also speaks to a lot of the people who are holding it. It's not, Tether risk isn't something they see as one of the biggest problems they're facing. It's not something they're desperate to solve. And the people who would be desperate to solve that are the people who just aren't touching Tether in the first place, and are often sort of not touching it for what seems like almost sort of ideological or similar reasons that go beyond just just like, well, what are the odds that it would crash during the 30 minutes that I would have to hold it?
Yeah, and so I saw your tweet a couple hours ago, and I think something. Well, this might be a outside question, but I might as well ask it now since we have the time. We're running a bit late, but let me just ask a few more. So you said the FTX has lower liquidation numbers than most exchanges, and they give a few reasons. And then there's a big chart of these big differences between OB, BitMEX, OKX, Binance, and FTX. And what's going on in there? Can you kind of explain?
Yeah.
I don't like. Really curious to know what the amount of liquidations, what's happening, or what's the highlight FTX here.
Yeah, so FTX has way lower liquidation per volume numbers than BitMEX, for instance, and BitMEX is the highest, with OK, Huobi, and Binance somewhere in the middle. And I think this speaks to a number of things. One is I just think that the ratio is insane on BitMEX. I mean, nowhere else in the world do you see a venue where the liquidation to volume ratio is as high as it is there. And so, that's one piece of it. It's competing with sort of an obscenely high number. But I think another piece of this is just you look at the user bases. FTX's user base, it tends to be larger users, more institutional on average. Everyone has institutions, everyone has retail, but FTX is on average has more institutions. That tends to be more volume per liquidations. And there are a lot of things about FTX that are designed to sort of discourage getting liquidated. Everything from warnings if you choose high leverage, to cross margin, to partial liquidations, to using USD collateral. And I think a lot of that sort of speaks to FTX is sort of designed with reducing the incidence of liquidations in mind. And so I think that's all sort of a piece of this. So I think another piece of this is that, there's sort of this unique, this very pro-liquidation culture that sort of was adopted, especially at BitMEX, that just has spread less to other places. And so I think you put all that together and you just get, way lower liquidation rates on FTX than on BitMEX, with, the sort of Chinese exchange is sitting somewhere in the middle of that.
Okay, so I think we're going to wrapping up today's session with just one final question, which is, Bitcoin as money. How has Bitcoin changed the way you think about money? I would like to have Zhao kind of take it from that. Bitcoin. How did Bitcoin change what you think about money?
I think Bitcoin is already kind of money right now, but because it's because of its volatility, it's still too much. There's still too much volatility of Bitcoin. There's a word about sufficient market, right? In the sufficient market, means it's very hard to make money because there are a lot of strong hands. But if you look at the crypto market, there were still too many weak hands. There were too many small holders, and they don't have the professional trading skills. They don't have their mathematical model how to trade. But in the future, I'm expecting when the price went to, let's say, 100,000. 100,000 means 10 times than now. 100,000 dollar per one Bitcoin means the total market cap of Bitcoin will be 2 trillion. $2 trillion. This is almost the same size of the Fed, of the balance sheet of the Fed. In this size, the Bitcoin I think will have much less volatility, and it will be much more like it will be more sufficient, which means harder to make money in the market. But also there will never be a sufficient market. So there will be still opportunities to make money, but harder, and less volatility.
So Sam, the philosophical question here: Bitcoin as money. How has Bitcoin changed your definition of money, and where do you think Bitcoin is headed to in the years to come?
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly, growing up in the States, I always thought of moving money as easy. I sort of assumed that's how it was, because basically you never do anything other than credit cards and like occasionally other things. And as soon as I got into crypto, I realized not just how hard it is to move crypto around, but how hard it is to move fiat around. And that was sort of a rude awakening when I, tried to open our first bank account, and it was a nightmare. I mean, they kept getting closed down. Places didn't want to work with the crypto business. Try to send an international wire transfer. The bank doesn't have a way to do it online. So you have to go to the branch and watch someone slowly type out like the reference codes like Q3. So we're like, we got 5 minutes to get this wire out before the deadline. Can you please hurry up? Like 7, 2, T. And we're like, no, that's not a T. You typed that wrong. That's an R. And they'd already gone on, and then they changed the wrong letter. And you're like trying to get them to type this thing in real time correctly. And they're getting their managers and it's just this massive production, send a wire transfer, which is something that I sort of thought of as like, not a hard process previously. And so I think it really highlighted to me in general how difficult it is to move funds around through any means, and also how important the infrastructure is for that, because crypto is theoretically extremely easy to move around, and yet it can still be a nightmare because of infrastructural issues. Everything from withdrawal limits to not enough money in a hot wallet to bank accounts not willing to interface with them, to everything else, which creates so many more hurdles.
Wow, Bitcoin has fast money.
Yeah,
across the world.
And Bitcoin, I want to say more. Bitcoin could also be credit. Or Bitcoin could replace credit. For example, if you want to borrow money, you can already use Bitcoin to borrow as much as you want right now on many platforms, including RenrenBit right now. Yeah, so it can replace credit, because in the traditional financial world, we know when the financial crisis happened, the reason might be a limitation for credit, but if the crisis happen, financial crisis, they have to give almost unlimited credit to the big financial institutions, which generates more problem actually. So yeah, so I believe that as a money, the money should have some scarcity. So Bitcoin has the scarcity, and what we can do in the future might be add the elasticity, how to say it, 弹性 elasticity to Bitcoin, so it can expand when the market requires.
Okay. Anything for you to add on top of that, Sam?
I totally agree that there's a lot of cool things you can build on crypto, and I think lending is an obvious example of that. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that over time. And I think one sort of way that maybe we've gotten sidetracked a little bit as an industry is on the DeFi versus centralized finance distinction. That there's been a lot of people focusing on building out DeFi and then focusing on the failures of DeFi, and I think that my guess is that I'm super excited about a lot of the super decentralized stuff, but I'm also pretty excited about things that just take us one step in that direction, and trying to build a solid, product that just works super well and is a bit more decentralized than the previous one, and that we can sort of build our way like that to cooler and cooler and more complex and more decentralized products on a bridge of things that people trust and that work.
And speaking of overtime, we're really overtime today for this fireside chat between Zhao Dong and Sam. So I want to thank you two gentlemen. Thank you so much for the time today, and I hope you have an amazing and happy Bitcoin halving the years and hours to come, and happy trading. Thank you both gentlemen, and thank you for this time today. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Happy trading.
See ya.
Take care. Have a good one.